Hello, and welcome to the MKG podcast, the podcast that helps marketers grow their businesses using the 4 M's, the right means, messaging, media, and measurement. I'm your host, Carrie Gard, and to help me introduce today's guest, I have our analytics expert, Spencer Mays. Spencer, thanks for joining me.
No problem.
Spencer, let's talk Martech. What's Martech mean to you?
Martech to me means any tool that helps automate, streamline, or optimize any aspect of marketing, usually digital marketing specifically, where there's lots of data to tie together and kind of automate those processes that can take a long time if you had to do them manually.
And it's sort of this, I want to say new-ish idea. I feel like the technology has definitely sort of come a long way, but it was sort of something that was in the background where the tech was there and we used it, but it's definitely become more in the foreground of now that it's not just the tech, but it's also how to use it, right? It can't just be about the technology.
Right. It's definitely how you implement it and how you can use that technology to either measure specific goals or improve campaigns, that kind of optimization that helps improve a company's marketing efforts.
Definitely. And today's guest, Scott Brinker, who is a software product leader at HubSpot, he directs the company's platform strategy and business programs and tech partners, but he's big on Martech. It's his thing for sure. And we actually talk about the 4 archetypes of Martech. So let's take a listen to my interview with Scott.
Sounds great.
Scott, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Carrie.
I am really interested in this topic because I've been in marketing now for, I'm gonna date myself here, 10 plus, I'm gonna just say 10 plus years. And there's this term that I feel like has been dropped in a lot of conversations that I've been having lately, but I never really took the time to step back and really ask what this thing is. And I thought you would be the perfect person to really help me unwrap this thing called Martech.
I'll do the best I can. I mean, so there's the easy definition, right? Which is Martech, marketing technology, is essentially any technology that's designed for marketers for the work that they do. I think, what's been surprising is over the past decade, just the number of different kinds of tools that sort of fall into that Martech bucket. I mean, well, that's one of the hobbies I've had is trying to track the number of different tools, and it's in the thousands.
Oh my gosh.
So I think there's some interesting stuff about, just when marketers try and wrap their heads around Martech. I mean, it's a lot. It's not any one thing. And then the other aspect of it that's always worth, keeping in mind is, the technologies, it's cliche to say, well, it's just the tool. What really matters is the craftsperson. But it's true, right? It's like this discipline of how do we as marketing teams actually apply these tools. In some ways, that's almost the more interesting, well, not some ways, that actually is the more interesting aspect of Martech as far as I'm concerned.
Right, because I feel like technology sort of has been playing a behind the scenes role for so long, where it was like, oh, there's this CRM tool I can start using to put my contacts in and then do some follow-up. And oh, there's this email platform that I can connect to my CRM to then send out some automated emails. And so these tools have sort of happened, I feel like, and we've sort of added them to our stack, so to speak, without really thinking about it in the forefront and having it be the thing that drives us versus a nice to have, essentially.
Yeah, it's definitely, in fact, actually, I mean, even using the word stack, right? I mean, like, it wasn't that long ago that would have just been a completely foreign term. Like, what? I work in marketing. Why would I be in the stacks? That's some like thing the software engineers deal with. So yeah, it has been a lot of change. I think what's interesting is, I think your insight on like how this has come about really, gets right on the heart of the challenge, which is for the industry as a whole, it wasn't like there was some overarching plan of like, okay, these are all the things we're going to adopt, and this is how they'll fit together, and you know, these will be the steps, and yeah, it's clear what the path was going to be. Instead, it happened in these different pockets, and these different pockets, like what people were doing with their CRM and what they were doing with email marketing, and what they were doing in social or content marketing, like all these things were happening in their, you know, different little silos, if you will. Even if it was just one person as a marketer, I mean, still it's like, oh yeah, here I'm off doing this thing with email. Oh, this is something completely different of what I'm doing on my website. And we're now really just in this past year or two, I think, collectively starting to realize, okay, wait a second, big picture of running modern marketing is not these individual tools, but how do we orchestrate all that together into sort of a larger picture of, you know, what marketing is delivering?
Yeah, and how do they all work together? Because now, especially with, start using some jargon, but APIs and how they can connect and talk to each other. And you know, it's like you're saying, you'll have the social team over here using, you know, something like Buffer versus the marketing team, which will be using Marketo, versus the sales team using Salesforce. But you can actually now start to weave these things together and then start to look at the analytics and start to tell a story, and all these things start to happen when you do start putting the tech first. But how do you start putting that tech first? I mean, as individuals, we sort of like figured these tools out on our own, but we don't, I mean, we're not, I'm going to speak for myself and not make a blanket statement on all marketers here, but like I, as you know, I married a developer, and I awe at what he can do, because I am not a developer by any means. I'm not an IT person, even though I like to pretend to be on my staff, but I don't have the skill set to sort of start to marry some of these tools together. But you sort of need to be able to do that, right? I mean, I feel like you do. I can't.
Yeah, well, and I think the way you feel about it is actually the way, I mean, a lot of marketers I talk to feel, right? It's like, yes, what's the, like, Star Trek, like the doctor is like, you know, damn it, Jim, I'm a, you know, doctor, not a whatever.
Yes.
It's like, yeah, I feel like that voice appears in my head. I'm like, damn it, I'm a marketer. I'm not, you know, like an IT enterprise architect. And so, and right, there's such value to the marketing dimension of that, right? I mean, like, the challenge, the tools in many ways are commoditized. I mean, anybody can buy a copy of, you know, any CRM, any, like, the art of how you actually get value out of that is, you know, then the marketing you leverage on top of it. So I definitely am in the camp of not wanting people to give the technology more credit than it's due, because most of it really comes down to the, you know, the creativity and the passion and the, you know, the craftsmanship that, you know, marketers bring to these tools.
And the people. So let's talk about that, because that's really where we wanted to dive in today, is the right people to help a marketing team sort of thrive in this shift from marketing to Martech, right? You sort of outlined 4 people, if you will, but do you need those, before we get into who those 4 people are, do you need those 4 people on top of your existing marketing team, or are they one and the same? Talk me through sort of how the organization is looking at.
Yeah, no, it's a fair question, and it's always a bit challenging because scale matters, right? Like, if you're a small company and basically you've got one person, or maybe a half of one person who's like doing marketing, then I look at that quadrant about these different kinds of marketing technologist roles as really roles more than having to be individuals. And that for a small business, yeah, it might be one person who's wearing multiple hats. It's just those 4 different roles become 4 different elements that I think you want to think about. Like, okay, you know, what is the tool set I'm using for marketing? And so, like, maybe it's easier to actually just go ahead and state those 4 quadrants.
Sure.
So, like, you know, the first one, it's basically marketers who become more and more comfortable with applying these tools in the work they do, in, you know, campaign creation and program creation and creative, you know, testing. You know, so pretty much every marketer at this point, you can't help it. You kind of have to be at least in that quadrant.
Mm-hmm.
The other ones are a little bit more specialized, and they are this idea of, okay, so someone who's focused on the orchestration. Like if I've got multiple different tools, you know, how are these pieces connecting together? What's some of the, you know, the issues of workflow right now that marketing has so many moving parts that change so rapidly?
So many.
Like what sort of processes are in place to help keep track of that in an organized fashion?
So like an operations person.
Yeah, you know, I mean, that is to me like the classic marketing ops role.
Mm-hmm.
Really a deeper analytics specialist, which, I mean, again, if you could have multiple people and you could have someone who is like really just a super sort of data sciencey person who could just dig into the data and find much deeper insights than you would get on, like, say, the average dashboard in your marketing automation program, that'd be great. And then the fourth role is I call them makers, because they really are kind of almost the developers who now do work in marketing. And like the easiest example is like web developers. I mean, the people who are building out these web experiences for our customers, it's a lot of that is usually driven by like a marketing vision, but the actual work still involves, you know, some JavaScript coding and things like that.
I actually just met someone. I never heard of this role, but it makes so much sense now. I just met somebody who, he's a developer, but he works on the marketing side, just automating the email flow for things like your credit card was declined, your you need to update your password, you need to reset your password, you need to, so all sort of like the IT things that happen behind the scenes, he sits with the marketing team developing all these emails and the whole flow and triggers for how I thought that was so, I was like, yes, duh, there's this person who has to go do this thing, but it's so interesting that they actually sit with the marketing team. And I would agree that he would be under sort of this maker's space because he's a developer, but it's email. I just thought that was fascinating. You never think about the roles that are sort of needed you just get these emails and you just don't even question where on earth they came from. Magic.
Is great if you can afford it. You know? And so when you're a small company, you can't always afford to have a specialist like that. But yeah, you know, as you have larger companies, I mean, there are, you know, Fortune 500 companies that they have like whole teams of people who do nothing but development, whole teams doing nothing but the analytics for marketing. And, you know, that's great. We can all aspire to have such wonderful resources.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's definitely that he works for a giant company. I won't give the name away. But no, like they need somebody who does just that on a regular basis. Where yes, I agree. Where you're starting off really small and you're in sort of the startup space, and you need somebody who can more of that T-shaped marketer, but not just a marketing person who knows how to do a bit of SEO and PPC and analytics, but can actually, to your point, now wear a little bit of that tech hat too and know how to, because if they're going to start off in the startup space with you, knowing how to set up that tech stack ahead of time early on, even if it's just two pieces, right? Even if it's just saying, okay, we're just going to start with email and we're just going to make sure that all of our marketing materials are tagged appropriately so that our email system is essentially telling us where people are coming from, right? We're not talking about a lot of tools. We're not talking about, a huge stack of these things sitting on top of each other, but thinking ahead that early on can really set the company up for success in the long run as you do build on the stack, as you do add team members. Thinking ahead now rather than being like, oh yeah, I need this thing that's going to sort of sit over here and I'm going to use it, but it's not going to be the forefront of everything that I'm doing.
Yep. Yeah, no, I think you are absolutely right. And I also feel like some of the responsibility, actually a lot of responsibility still lies with the marketing technology companies themselves is, a lot of these tools are not particularly easy to use. Let let me not be so negative. The positive spin is we could improve the user experience of a lot of Martech tools significantly, and it would benefit everybody. And, I think this is, most marketing tech companies that I talk to, that is a big part of what they see as their mission is like, how do they make this more usable? How do they make it more accessible? Because at the end of the day, people only stick with these tools if they get value out of them. And one of the first steps of getting value out of it is actually being able to use it to and so I feel like the industry is aligned in the right direction of where it needs to go, but there's still a lot of ground to cover.
There is. I mean, even just an email system, we switched, it hurt my heart a little bit, I'm not going to lie. We switched from HubSpot to Infusionsoft, which is now called Keep, because we worked with a really great company who helped us build all of our email marketing automation, which isn't our forte. So we had to go find people who knew how to do this thing better than we could. And they're brilliant. And they spun up these campaigns in Keep so quickly and so easily. I was astounded. And then I got home, and then I wanted to spin up my own campaigns. And then I had to basically train myself from scratch, and I had no idea what to do. I found that HubSpot was 1,000 times easier, but it was nice to work with a company who could sit down with me and talk about how, user flows and those sort of things, and then customer journey, and then go and build this stuff for me. But I totally didn't even think about the usability of it when I got home, when I would have to go do it on a regular basis. It is daunting to sit and recreate in a campaign. Even just by copying it over, you have to then go into every single piece and then customize it and then publish it, or turn it from, I forget what it is, like turn it from a draft to, to on essentially, but it's a lot of steps, and you really do have to like train yourself on how to do it. And the training materials are out there, and yes, it's really helpful. HubSpot, I know, also has a whole training sort of system, and all that's well and good, but when you have to sit down and do it yourself, it is, and when you've never done it before, especially, it can feel very overwhelming very quickly just in trying to use the technology, whether alone trying to figure out how to create a user journey and all the things that have to happen beforehand.
Yeah, I am sure there are a lot of marketers listening to you who are nodding their heads and like, yeah, been there, felt that. Yeah,
it's amazing once you figure it out. You feel like a superhero, but building up that strength to get there it's rolling a boulder uphill, quite frankly.
Yeah. And it's interesting for the services providers in this space because, on one hand, it's like, yeah, they are such an essential piece for so many companies now of of bridging that gap.
Mm-hmm.
Being like, okay, well, we know we need to get started with this, let's hire this agency, this services group that can do it for us and quickly and expertly, and they know their stuff, and that is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think, there's a lot of opportunity for the services side here to, just also it's the feed someone a fish versus teaching them how to fish.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of opportunity,
mm-hmm.
I think, still to services teams that help their clients also learn how to fish a bit, because there's always more that's going to come behind. How do you make sure there's sort of a growing competency within your client? Ultimately, I think helps a lot of services business.
Definitely. So let's go back to the marketing teams though, because if they, let's talk about certainly small businesses we've touched on where, you're going to have to think about technology in the forefront and having a person on your, who is your marketing team, because you're probably going to have a person who is your marketing team who's going to have to think about this. But as they continue to grow and as they create a much bigger team and they need more automation and they need more technology, in an ideal world, let's say, when you're talking about those 4 quadrants and the people you're talking about, the 4 quadrants you gave are people who already exist on your team probably, or are already positions, shouldn't say people, but are already positions that essentially exist on your team. And basically what you're saying is, yes, you still need those people 100%, but there's an underlying element to those people now, right? As technology starts to become a bigger and bigger aspect of what it is that we're doing. Because as much as people love to say that machines are going to take over, I actually have to disagree with that, because you're always going to need people to program those machines. and they're going to have to know how those machines work.
Yeah. I subscribe to the belief that things like, machine learning and a lot of these artificial intelligence technologies, there's a lot of value they can bring, particularly in, data analysis. There's a lot they can do in, automating things that, would otherwise be very manual and time consuming. There's a lot of good that comes there, but it's like it in many ways elevates the responsibility. I don't have to spend my time with all that manual labor. Now there's no excuse for me not actually applying my brain towards the higher level of function, of how's this stuff actually working to change my business? How's it making customer experience, customer life better? And so, yeah, I think you're right. I mean, each of those roles that, I mapped out in those quadrants, yeah, in a very real sense, they've always been roles and responsibilities that are sort of baked into marketing. It's just now the importance of them continues to rise, and the skill that's expected, like it used to be, right? I mean, I don't know, go back 15 years ago, and if you could read a report about your web traffic that just said, hey, we got these many page views on this page and these many page views on this page, and wow, this is the report. Actually, at the time, that was kind of state of the art, versus today. I mean, people, even just on the website, even, marketers who aren't professional data scientists, they still get pretty good here. Okay, well, wait, let me understand this in the context of a flow, where people were coming from, what were these sources, what's the relative conversion rates, it's just become a much more sophisticated discipline that, I mean, there's no reason to believe that won't continue to, the bar will continue to rise for the next 10 years too.
Well, it's going to have to, especially as technology continues to change. And there's a really, big change that's coming, from Google specifically, right? Where the cookie-based tracking is going to essentially go away and be replaced. And this is a bit out of my depth, so I don't know the bulk of it, but I do know it's going to impact the way that we've been tracking for a very long time. And it's definitely going to impact our tech stack in how we understand where, who a user is and how they came to our brand and what marketing channels are working and how our efforts are actually paying off on the back end. Like all of that's going to change in a pretty dramatic way, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing I love about Martech is it's not any one thing that's changing. It's like there are always tons of things changing around us. I mean, the third-party cookies going away is a huge one. In many ways, we just have gotten over a bit of the hump of the first incarnation of that, of people wrestling with GDPR and now CCPA. But meanwhile, we have all these other things that continue to change. What are the social media channels that we're engaging people? How much do we engage people through email, and how much do we engage them now through messaging platforms, all over the place? Yeah, it's like anytime you're like, okay, I just got my head around the current set of stuff we're doing, everyone's like, no, don't worry, it's all going to change in 2 years.
It's like your children, right? You just figure out finally all the steps to get them to go to bed perfectly, and then they have a growth spurt the next day, and all your hard work is thrown out the window, and you got to start all over again.
Yes, very, very accurate metaphor there.
Well, Scott, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for teaching me the ways of Martech and what Martech means and where it's come and where it's going, and the people who are really going to be needed continuously, not just in their current roles, but how they're going to have to sort of step up their game, so to speak, to continue to keep up with technology and have it work for them rather than against them. Because I have to say, I do think technology sometimes gets in our way and is more hurtful than helpful.
Well, I am with you 100% on, let's figure out how to make the technology work for us.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much. And I will certainly share your information out, especially that specific blog post about the 4 quadrants, so people can see what this really means and how they can start to transform their marketing team to include this. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. So that was my conversation with Scott. Spencer, in terms of Martech, what technology do our clients use to drive, capture, and measure KPIs that have become your favorite, and why?
Most of our clients use a combination of some type of ad platform, Google Ads, Bing Ads, to kind of drive their demand generation. And then to capture and measure those KPIs, it's usually some type of combination of Google Analytics, Marketo, Salesforce, perhaps Adobe Analytics. Some of my favorites are definitely Google Analytics, just to be able to see how campaigns are performing in terms of the website and conversions. And then Salesforce is also great to see how those conversions can go down the funnel and turn into revenue for the company. Another favorite of mine as of late has been Google's data connector for Salesforce that allows the ability to easily pull Salesforce data without any API code or third-party connections.
Nice. That's a game changer.
Yeah, it definitely saves time in terms of getting that data out of the Salesforce system and into other platforms where you can kind of combine the data and look at things holistically.
Really see end to end, like where that pipeline came from. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, and then tie it back to cost as well and see kind of the ROI.
And that's all our clients care about at the end. I mean, ideally, what our clients care about at the end of the day is like how much money did I make, right? So being
Right.
able to actually say, not only this is how much money you made, but here's why. That's huge.
Definitely.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Spencer.
No problem.
If you'd like to learn more about Scott Brinker, you can connect with him on LinkedIn. He also has a great website called chiefmartech.com, a whole ton of content. I know he mentioned it in the podcast, but seriously, like if you want to learn about Martech, that is the place to go check out and get started. Thank you for listening to the MKG podcast, the podcast that helps marketers grow their businesses using the 4 M's, the right means, messaging, media, and measurement. I'm your host, Carrie Gard, and until next time.